All right. Jackie, thanks for the quick introduction. I'm Kristopher Hughes, and I'm the visual brand manager over here at HashiCorp. So a little change of pace today, or at least for this presentation, as I'm sure most of these have been focused on a lot of project-related talks and some technical talks. And today we're going to talk about branding at HashiCorp. So recently, we were a part of had the chance to brand two new products, which I've been at HashiCorp for coming up on 3 years now. And this was the first opportunity we had to brand a new product, as it's been a little bit of a drought between these two new products and our previous ones. So this was an exciting process, and we thought it would be fun to kind of share some insight into that. So first and foremost, when we were kind of presented with this project, which was fairly early on, we needed to figure out, okay, what is boundary, what is waypoint? And this is kind of the beginning of every branding project, is kind of this deep research from someone who's not technical, as much as probably 99% of people at HashiCorp. This was certainly a important and key task for us to kind of understand these technical concepts and features of these products. And so this involved meeting with partners within HashiCorp, whether that was product managers or marketing team leaders, and kind of understanding what, first and foremost, why are we creating these products? What's the problem that we're solving? How does boundary and waypoint make the life of a practitioner easier? And so we read the RFCs and PRDs and messaging positioning documents around this. So now that we were kind of armed with this context of what this product is, and why we're creating these things and what does it do, we then kind of set out exploring different visual concepts that can be applied to these products. So, for those that are familiar with HashiCorp's branding in our product suite, you likely know that most of our products employ the use of the first letter of the word. So that's obviously going to be the primary visual metaphor that we'll be using. In addition to that, boundary is obviously a security product. It's this idea of creating these boundaries within our infrastructure that actors can then access. And it's somewhat of a permeable boundary, one that we want to make easy for people to access that can, but incredibly difficult for those that shouldn't. And so there's kind of these guardrails that are put into place, and then obviously this kind of metaphor of a firewall or some sort of a wall to protect that information. With Waypoint, same story here, with using obviously the W as kind of the foundation of what that logo or logo mark should look like. But in addition to that, it's really a path of deployment. And what are all of these steps that are difficult for practitioners to go through to deploy an app, and how can we better automate that process? And so there's this ultimate destination or point that we're getting to, but there's also a path, and a multi-point path at that, like getting to that. We also explored the idea of kind of using hexagons to kind of relate to Nomad. For those that are, again, familiar with our product suite, that Nomad is within the deployment kind of layer of infrastructure where Waypoint sits. So armed with these visual metaphors, we then go to the next stage where, okay, now let's start interpreting these metaphors into icons and logos. And this is the play stage for a designer. This is definitely the funnest part of any branding project, where we get to just sit down and rapidly execute and build, and just build tons of options and logos, and build some more and continue building. And this phase is really all about quantity. We in order to kind of unblock a lot of the creative ideas, it's just great to get as much stuff as you can on paper, similar to the writing process. For those that ever dealt with writer's block, sometimes it's great just to write, even if it's complete crap. It's great to just get that out there so they can start getting that flow going, and then you can iterate from there. And so that's what this process was, is exploring many options for Boundary Waypoint. And as we explored these options, there's kind of these parameters that we're looking for in a good logo mark. And that is, how well does that logo mark tell the metaphor of what this product does, or what this company does. It's also aesthetically, it needs to be well balanced, and what we typically refer to as tight, which is a mark that has great contrast and balance between the elements within that. The next thing is, in our case, we have a product suite of logos that we need these two new marks to align to. And so not only do we need to kind of worry about those first two things, but also how does this fit within our current product suite so that our products feel like a family and can be recognized that as such. And then lastly, the mark needs to be unique and ownable. There's quite a few options in here that after we start and we design something like, oh, we just made the Sony Walkman logo, or whatever it may be. It's funny how many times you explore and then realize you've just recreated a logo that already exists. And so that's the challenging part, is trying to find something that fits all of those initial checkboxes, but then also feels unique and ownable. So once we go through this process, we then start refining. So based on that criteria, we obviously immediately eliminate quite a few, and kind of hone in on which ones are completing those kind of check boxes the best, and then we kind of slowly start refining from there. Once we have a pretty good set of marks that we feel good about within the creative team, we then go and further the circle of kind of influence and start sharing these marks with a broader team of stakeholders with the brand, and start receiving feedback, which is one of the most critical phases of branding is feedback. It's funny how many times you hear, oh, that looks like this, or that looks like that, and you just never saw that because you're just too close. And have really great feedback on how to improve some of these marks, or ideas that you hadn't thought about. And so this is certainly one of my favorite phases. At times we get some really great feedback. I'll share some of those here. One that I especially liked is that I could live with these, but I'm not enamored with them. Or I don't feel great about the metaphor, but it's not bad. Although I think my ultimate favorite is just, it was simply typed back to us, not fun. All kidding aside, these are obviously some great points of feedback received that were kind of fun, but all joking aside, we did receive some really great feedback, and were able to improve those marks. And even what designer is not motivated by even some of these, like I could live with these, but I'm not enamored with them. That, if anything else, that really puts the drive, at least to me, to go back to the drawing board and continue to refine. After we did so, we continued to refine these even further, and have came to a subset of options that we liked, and then ultimately pitched these to the executive team of stakeholders, with the recommendation of the final two. And at that point, I was happy to see kind of the group of stakeholders kind of all circling around these two options and agreeing that these were the best, which we feel have done a great job at kind of checking all those boxes with Boundary. Obviously the obvious first visual cue that we see here is that Boundary is a B and Waypoint is a W. But beyond that, the idea of Boundary is that it draws this, you're able to draw these boundaries around your infrastructure to secure it, but at the same time, it's somewhat permeable. The idea of boundary is to not only secure, but also to do so while making it very easy for those that need the access to get that access. And so it's this idea of this like motion of drawing this boundary that is permeable, and these agents, kind of like these blocks that we see here, can access that. Waypoint here on the right, there's a destination here on the top right that you're trying to get to. There's kind of this motion of movement from bottom left to top right of kind of deploying an app. But everyone's steps of doing that is different, and you can define and change those kind of waypoints as you go from that bottom left to the top right. And so these are the kind of the final marks that not only signal the products by letter, but also do so metaphorically. And you can see how those are locked up with our logo type, and then how those fit within our product suite here at the bottom, where they feel they fit quite naturally within that suite. In addition to that, every kind of identity, visual identity for any company or product, it's a visual system, right? It's not just a logo or logo mark. And so we've also created visual assets to accompany these identities. With boundary, it was a lot of fun to explore. Okay, what does boundary look like as a pattern? For those that are familiar with HashiCorp's branding, we often employ patterns as kind of the secondary visual identity of these products. And with boundary is this idea of drawing these kind of multi-layered boundaries that you can deploy. And again, we kind of bring in those little subtle nods back to the mark with these little blocks that kind of represent somewhat permeable boundary as well. That's still really quite secure. And with Waypoint, again, is very similar to the mark. Is this idea of kind of going upwards and deploying an app somewhere. And so you kind of have this motion of kind of upward to the upward to the right. And then you've got these different waypoints, these deviations in that path that are kind of customizable for your particular workflow. All right, so the next kind of part of this, once we have designed the marks, and you've seen that up until the last two slides here, everything is done in black, and that's actually really quite intentional. Designers, when we are designing logos and branding and identity, we always start with just black and white, because that's what really tells you whether or not a mark is working or not. When you start adding in color and different other effects, that can kind of muddy that process up. It needs to work really well as a black and white mark before you start adding color. So at this point, we're like, all right, well, now we've gotten that far. How do we add color? So white, greenish blue, and warm red. We're still coming up with better names for that. So Mitchell, not long before the release of Waypoint and Boundary, tweeted out this tweet where he said, most importantly, we've got something coming, but most importantly, we picked the new product color. And it's funny. I love working with Mitchell and Armand. I've never had two executives more passionate about the brand before, and it makes it really, really quite fun to work on the brand team at HashiCorp. It's exciting to see Mitchell kind of promote this work. So Mitchell tweeted this out. Internally, we had Aaron ask, well, what goes into picking a product color? I assume it's a bit more complex than just going, I like this one. Yeah, it is. And I was glad to see that Mitchell responded saying, yes, there's actually quite a bit of thought and insight and strategy that goes into kind of picking these colors. And that's kind of the second part of this, is I'd like to kind of share with you what that process was like. So we had 6 products before the introduction of Boundary and Waypoint. And these products were all developed really, fairly early on in HashiCorp's kind of life cycle here. As I mentioned before, I've been here for close to 3 years. Boundary and Waypoint was the first new product launch that I was a part of. And these products were largely designed, especially the earlier ones, were kind of designed in a vacuum. There was certainly some themes around the naming and some of the identity, but there wasn't a kind of cohesive visual system that you could just apply to these new products that were coming out. And that was great, and it worked really well at that timeline, but it certainly presents some challenges later on when we're trying to determine, okay, well, what colors do we choose for boundaried waypoint, and how does this fit within the product suite of HashiCorp? And so that was a question that we asked ourselves and had thought over quite a bit. So we started kind of thinking about, okay, well, we can start now that with the introduction of boundary waypoint, it now makes sense to start categorizing our products by kind of the layers of infrastructure. So, on the left, we already had 3 products that, worked at the infrastructure layer of that, where we had Packer, Vagrant, Terraform. But then the networking layer and the security and applications layer each just had a single product. But now, so we introduced boundary waypoint, we start drawing buckets around these categories. And so that was kind of a challenge, like, all right, so this is kind of a trap, so to speak, that designers fall into. And if Mitch Rameski is watching this right now, he'll probably laugh, because we're kind of diving into another one of these with diagram work right now. But once you start that initial project of something, it's always amazing how many connections you can find to that challenge. Well, we need to pick a color for a boundary waypoint. All right, well, now we need to start thinking about the entire product suite and the entire product color palette. And it kind of snowballs into these different projects that you can tackle. And you have to just, you have to strategically decide what you need to take on at the moment, so that you can set yourself up for success and to create a system that's scalable. At the same time, you can't be doing that all the time. There's also business needs that need to be met, and marketing deadlines. And so there's always this kind of push and pull balance between those two. In this instance, we decided, okay, let's start thinking about the other products as well, and how all of these work together. So it created an opportunity for us to address some of the other challenges that we've already kind of noted in the back of our heads over the course of the last several years with our color palette. So the first challenge that we kind of noted that we'd like to kind of tackle is just the entire product color palette. The colors, because they were kind of picked in somewhat of a vacuum of each other, they weren't, you didn't, as you're designing these identities, you didn't have the luxury of just looking at all of them at the same time and kind of deciding, okay, what colors work great together. And so the result was a color palette that was non-harmonious and was, a bit cold and uninviting. There's also, we have one color per product. And so the kind of, as you deploy this color on materials, whether it be, whether it be product briefs or websites, whatever it may be, the overuse of these colors can certainly feel repetitive and monotonous. The other challenge that we came across is at HashiCorp, there's so much documentation and diagramming and kind of technical communication that having various colors at your disposal to be able to draw distinctions is super helpful. And having a single color palette definitely makes that challenging when trying to portray fairly complex ideas within a diagram. So, and then specifically looking at some of our product colors, Terraform is always an interesting one where it's kind of this like, is it blue, is it purple? It's kind of somewhere in the middle. And that's great for a lot of brands, but at HashiCorp, where things are really defined by color, it makes it a little bit difficult, especially when it's kind of close to vagrant's color and might clash with that. There's also production issues when you're producing swag or whatever it may be, where this color can easily shift and feel purple or blue. And so we figured, okay, well, here's an opportunity to kind of address this. With Nomad, we felt the color just felt a little subdued. It kind of feels more like a modern health food brand than a high-tech software brand. We don't want to go too neon or too crazy, but I think there was some room there for us to kind of revisit Nomad's color as well. Vol is an interesting one because it's black and it doesn't have a color. And I think that's really great for security. I think the metaphors they're drawn, makes sense. However, it does make it challenging when trying to draw attention to calls to action or other content. Whereas everything from a hierarchy standpoint kind of feels the same, except for perhaps partner logos, which is kind of the one thing that stands out on a lot of our Vault materials. It's also at a disadvantage when placed to other products when they're all other colors, and then Vault's just black or gray. It always feels a little off. And so those are some challenges with Vault that were like, okay, well, maybe we can take a look at this too at the same time. So overall, kind of going back to my earlier comment of, well, we needed to pick a color for Boundary and Waypoint. In reality, here's the full set of challenges that we ultimately decided on tackling for this project. And I think that this kind of makes sense as you go through the maturity model of any kind of business is as new things come along, you kind of take the opportunity to ask yourselves, what else can we set ourselves up for success that relate really closely to this particular challenge, and try to bucket those particular deliverables without getting too vague as far as what we're tackling. So the solution was a new product color palette, and the idea here is that we bucket our kind of infrastructure layers of kind of cloud infrastructure, and from the actual base layer of infrastructure to networking to security to applications. And we kind of bucket these within these different gradients along the color spectrum, and then kind of pull out specific colors that then apply to the products. So in doing so, we've kind of fixed, we were able to select some new products. Some are tweaked more than others. Terraform obviously tweaked quite a bit, whereas Packer, not so much. But all these were kind of tweaked a bit so that they would be able to follow in line with the color spectrum, feel harmonious, and work together as product line categories. And we kind of purposely chose colors that were we're still bright and friendly, but not overly saturated, so that it still felt professional. Okay, so then product lines, as I mentioned, we were able to kind of follow this paradigm. So with product lines, the idea here is that whenever you're talking about infrastructure or applications, you're able to use these gradients that go from one product color to another product color. So an example of this here, this is obviously just a kind of a mock-up. This isn't a real section, but it's just used to kind of visually show how this brand can be applied. Here, this section of the site could be around application layer of infrastructure, and you can use this gradient here to signal that, but then you can use specific colors for Nomad and Waypoint. The other benefit is a flexible color palette. Not only are we kind of choosing and refining our product colors, but we're also going to be adding in some more secondary colors so that we can then kind of integrate these colors and have more at a designer's disposal to be able to articulate concepts within diagrams when you have a better color palette than just purple. The challenge before was, well, if I use purple, everything's flat. If I start trying to introduce other colors, well, then that's kind of a really complex problem, because then it starts feeling like, well, if you're introducing green, it's Nomad. And that's not the case. We wanted to kind of, use these gradients and these multiple colors so that they feel consistent across the entire ecosystem of Terraform, but offer more at your disposal to work with. We also adjusted Terraforms and Nomads colors. Again, Terraform kind of shifted more into that purple space to kind of solidly live in that area of the color spectrum. And then Nomad, we're able to kind of just punch that up a little bit to feel a little more vibrant. Vault, we're excited to start introducing yellow as a new accent color with Vault. So that'll be exciting to kind of see the rollout of that over the next few months or so. One of the most important pieces of this system that we wanted to deploy is this idea of scalability, and that's kind of a really kind of key underlining North Star at HashiCorp is we scale and grow. What can we do in every single one of our teams to be able to scale? We're in that interesting phase at HashiCorp in our growth model of kind of transitioning from kind of the smaller kind of startup company to kind of becoming more sophisticated and being able to set ourselves up for growth and setting up our teams up to scale. And in this particular instance, in choosing kind of these particular color spectrums and choosing colors that are kind of equally spaced, then allows you to be able to plug in new colors for new products in the future. Not promising anything. I think Waypoint and Boundary, two new products at the exact same time, has us puts plenty on our plate for us now. But who knows in the future if new products come out, we'll have a system for that from a visual identity standpoint. So then the next kind of portion is guidelines. So, that's kind of the process that we're in now. We're developing really clear, in-depth guidelines for our team to be able to follow kind of these systems for color and other visual improvements that we're making that you'll likely see come out over the next few months at HashiCorp. So we're really excited to see that. So that's all. There's certainly quite a bit of work going on at HashiCorp. It's a continual process of improving our brand visual system, both at the corporate level and at the product level. And you'll certainly see some of these refinements. As I said earlier, you'll certainly see some of these refinements in the next little while.